Hello everyone, my name is Wayne.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we are your Bourbon Journey.
Welcome to episode 13 of Bourbon Trail Tales and Tastes, where we're leaving the Kentucky Bourbon Trail and heading up to Nashville, Indiana to visit Bear Wallow Distillery. You may not have heard of them before, but they are in the beautiful town of Nashville, as I mentioned. And in the same town, not very far away, is Hard Truth Distilling, so you've probably heard of them. Our visit there was very much a surprise because we had gone with the Evansville Bourbon Society for a VIP tour of Hard Truth Distilling. We had just arrived in town and we got a text message from one of the other members saying, "Hey, if you guys are in town, we're doing a tour at Bear Wallow. Come join us." And we did, and we had a great time. So that all happened before our event at Hard Truth. It was all in the same day. We did learn our lesson that day, though, that probably it wasn't the best idea that day because there was also the cross-country state championships happening, and there's only one road that connects Bear Wallow with Hard Truth. And what should have been a 15-minute drive was nearly an hour. So we were almost late. We want to go back to Bear Wallow when we don't feel like we're under time pressure and where we can sit and really enjoy it a little bit more. But I want to tell you a little bit about Bear Wallow before we start on our memories of it, just because I'm guessing many of you haven't heard about it. Again, Bear Wallow Distillery is in Nashville, Indiana. They have a family-run distillery. It is 100% owned by Susan Spagnuolo. They became part of a group that worked a year and a half to get laws changed in Indiana. And we've talked about that before, how difficult laws are in Indiana to get distilleries open. After the Artisan Distillers Law passed in July of 2013, which permitted federal and state construction and equipment, they started production in May of 2014. So it's still a family affair. As a matter of fact, her youngest son, Adam, is head of production. Her middle son, John, does all the marketing, logos, and labels. And her husband, Mike, who I believe did our tour.
Yes, he did.
Helps out on the weekends when he's not working his regular job. I think it's a pretty cool story that, she just happened along something like this in North Carolina on a trip and decided, hey, maybe we should start a distillery. They are very farm to glass. Everything that they use is grown in Indiana. All their corn and their wheat and everything else comes straight from Indiana. So it's a highly Indiana bottle. Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about arriving there? And because it wasn't hard to get there, it was getting back that was difficult. What do you remember when you first got there?
Well, I remember that we beat the rest of the group we were supposed to meet.
Yeah, we did.
And that was fine, except for the fact as we were waiting outside, we were basically getting attacked by wasps.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, I remember that. I remember sitting in the heat and being with a wasp and waiting for the other group that was supposed to show up because it was their tour, not ours. And so finally they opened the door and let us in. And I think, was the owner there that day?
I think Susan was there and she was working like behind the bar, helping people with bottles and everything. So
yes, she was working behind the register because I think I made some comment to her and that's where she admitted that she was the owner. Mm-hmm. And that really impressed me because it's like, wow, you're actually working here and stuff. And it's like, well, not only that, we ended up with her husband leading the tour. And it was a lot of fun. So I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because we walked in and in the very first room, it looked like a pretty good sized distillery. I mean, this is in like what I would call a pole barn almost, big huge metal building. But this one segment of it was where all the production took place. And we were able to walk up and look in the fermenting tanks, see where everything was happening. They had a pretty good size pot still. Mm-hmm. It was probably at least a couple 100 gallons. I can't remember now, but
it was pretty big.
It's pretty large. And that was interesting. And we turned around and looked on the wall. And if you've seen any of our vintage videos, they have the flag. Why don't you tell them about the flag you saw?
Well, I ended up looking up and there was the Whiskey Rebellion flag. And that was pointed out in the tour when they were talking about the history of whiskey in the United States and what led up to that. And then the Whiskey Rebellion flag, huge one, was hanging on the wall. Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked at it, I'm like, I got to get that. So we have a 25-foot flagpole out front and I love to get flags for it. So I looked at that, thought that was cool. We ended up then walking to the back, and which was nice because it was a little bit hot in the room that we were in. And we proceeded to go out where some of the barrels were, and they showed us around, and then they started pouring.
Yeah, Mike, the husband of the owner, and I was just looking at some pictures earlier today, and they had a whiskey thief pulling out of some barrels, and it's actually clear. I'm so accustomed to copper whiskey thieves, and this was our 18th distillery and our second one in Indiana. And it's probably the first time I'd ever seen, and perhaps have still seen, a clear thief. But it's probably really wise because you can actually see how much it's filling up as you're pulling from the barrel. So it's pretty smart when you think about it. Maybe not as jazzy as copper, but it still does its job. But anyway, we're all gathered around, and they're telling us stories, and they're pulling from some special barrels that are probably going to be perhaps single barrels. That's what I understand from reading about them and hearing the tour as well, is that, they mostly use 25-gallon barrels. Mm-hmm. And then they take like 8 to 12 of those to blend into their small batch, which we'll taste in a bit. And then every now and then as they're tasting them, like they're kind of like their honey barrels, right? That they decide, these should probably be a single barrel offering. So that's what we were tasting and kind of giving some input on as a bourbon society, because they wanted to know what we thought of these various barrels and which ones might make really good single barrels. And they were quite good. So we talked through that process quite a bit, which was great. And then they took us over for tastings. And I thought that was the tastings. We had quite a few tastes out of the barrel.
Oh, yeah.
Then they took us over this big table that had, I don't know how much stuff they sell there.
I think they had about 250 different tastes. They had, I'm surprised they didn't have pumpernickel moonshine. They had, it was like, you want to try, you want to try, you want to try. And most of it was really good stuff. We ended up coming home with several bottles of hooch.
And that's what they call it. They call it Indiana hooch. We decided not to sample any of that with y'all today,
right,
just because, it's a bourbon channel. But we did buy some Hoosier hooch is what they call it, mm-hmm. Hoosier hooch. And they had a couple flavors that were really amazing. So one of them they had was called sugar cream pie. And if you're from the South at all, or you had a grandma that liked to make pies like that, this, basically, non-aged spirit, let's call it moonshine, legal moonshine, was really tasted like sugar cream pie. It was insane. And every now and then I pull that out if I want some dessert and just have a little sip of it because it's pretty tasty. So we got some of that, and we got a bottle for my mom too, I think it was.
We did. Yeah. Also got a bottle of their straight hooch, and also because I like blueberry, I ended up buying a bottle of their blueberry moonshine, and that was pretty good. Mm-hmm. That was pretty good stuff. I'm waiting for a boysenberry, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Anyway, so then we finally, after doing all this tasting, and we have a place to go, we decided to go ahead and settle up, buy our bottles, and we went ahead and picked these two because they were bourbons.
Yeah, and they also have a rye, but we were really, truly not into rye at that point in time. We like it a lot more now. But we couldn't decide between the two. We had tasted them, so we went for each one of them. I can tell you a little bit about them so that you can get familiar. So they use the title Gnawbone, and that's actually an unincorporated county in Indiana. So I think it has some historical perspective for them. So the first one is a Gnawbone straight bourbon whiskey by Bear Wallow. It is 65% corn, 25% wheat, and 10% malted barley. The proof is at 100. This is batch 21, bottle 115. And I already mentioned that most barrels are 25 gallon and therefore aged approximately 2 to 3 years. We bought this at the distillery that day for $49.99. The other one is the Gnawbone single barrel. They call them limited edition and barrel strength because they don't guarantee that when you walk in, you're going to be able to get a single barrel. Again, straight bourbon whiskey by Bear Wallow, the same mash bill as the other, but this one is barrel strength. Therefore, it is 121 proof, and it is barrel 28, bottle 32. It was purchased that same day for $69.99 at the distillery.
Okay, so we're going to start on the right here with, this is the 100 proof, correct?
It is. It's the small batch.
Small batch.
It's got it's pretty very nice color. It's medium amber, I would say.
Sporting a rim.
And probably, again, it's probably just 2 to 3 years old, but when you have that small of a barrel, more of the liquid percentage is touching it. Therefore, you're going to get a little bit aging a little bit quicker.
I'm already smelling it from here, actually.
Yeah, let's see. We have enjoyed these bottles quite a few times out on the patio with a cigar. I think we discovered they were pretty good with cigars.
Yes.
It's got a really nice nose. I'm not picking up a lot of wheat notes. Considering it's 25% wheat, I kind of thought I would get more wheat notes on the nose.
I'm getting a little standard vanilla caramel.
Well, cheers to Bear Wallow.
Cheers. Well, you can taste that it's a wheater on the mouth.
And it's got some really good spice notes too.
Mm-hmm. On the mouth, probably not the correct way to put it, but in the mouth, you can tell right away. As much as it did not smell like a wheater, it's 180 degrees opposite. It is upfront wheat.
Yeah, it's got some nice soft notes, but it's got a big kick of white pepper.
Yes.
Big kick of white pepper.
Not a long finish at all.
I haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, almost a little bit of honey on there.
To me, it's more of a honeysuckle.
Okay.
More of like a plant.
I know you like eating plants. You must have eaten plants a lot growing up.
That was...
But I would bet that I sucked on more honeysuckle than you did.
Probably.
But I think it's got some nice notes. It's not as pastry as you sometimes get with a wheater, but it does have those honey notes and almost some bread-like qualities. And I think it's got a pretty decent mouthfeel too. It doesn't have really strong legs, but it does have medium legs. And I think that's kind of coming through as well with how it feels when you're drinking it.
I would agree.
Now, what were you saying about the finish?
The finish is very short, but it's nice. And you had mentioned it, and I thoroughly agree. It's a lot of white pepper in the back. It's not obnoxious, but it's definitely white pepper. There's no cinnamon or anything else. It's white pepper and maybe a tad bit of the barrel.
Yeah, and I mentioned, because I was actually getting it on the palate too. When I had my first sip, I could taste it. But I'm feeling it's because I haven't had a sip for a bit, and I'm feeling like it might be not as short as maybe you thought, because I'm still feeling some of it. I wouldn't say long, but I would probably call it medium. And it is just this nice, warm, kind of white pepper thing happening with a little bit of the sweet notes. It tastes a little more caramel on the finish than it does honey on the palate. I think it's pretty good. I would buy that one again.
I think it's pretty good. It would depend on how much it is.
It was $50 the first time.
If it's 50 to 60, I'd probably do it. For a wheater, and especially on the palate of being a wheater, yeah, it's worth it.
And a craft made, they're doing farm to glass, and all that counts too.
Yes, and I probably would, because I'm a sucker for people, and they were both really, really nice. And
everyone
so was
that worked, the lady that was working there was great too.
Well, they were really great. They were really into the crowd. I forget how many people. It was a pretty decent amount of people.
We probably had like 10, but there were other people pouring in there because again, it was so busy in Nashville, Indiana that weekend, and everybody and their brother was showing up.
And so it ended up being a lot of people in there, and they got going. And like I said, they were great people.
Well, let's try the single barrel. It's the same mash bill. Probably about the same age. It's just that it's a single barrel instead of a blended batch. Yeah, I'm just getting things that are more pronounced, really, from the single barrel notion. As I recall, it's 121 proof. So it's a bit of a jump from what we just had.
I'm getting traditional baking spices.
Caramel. It doesn't have a very different nose from the first one. Matter of fact, I may just compare.
Well, if you're not careful, you'll hit the alcohol.
I think the nose is very similar, and it's the same mash bill, same age, same everything. So that doesn't surprise me. But I'm guessing on the palate we're going to get a little different. So here's to the single barrel. That's got a lot of more substance. Not that the first one didn't, but it's 21 points higher.
Well, the wheat is I think much more pronounced in this, but there's a lot
in the small batch.
in the
Okay.
in the small batch. The single barrel, it's there at the beginning, and then all of a sudden there is a cacophony of flavors that start to come out in it. There's like a little bit of cinnamon. There's a little bit of brown sugar.
It's got some great legs on it,
and it's got a really good color. It's got a darker color, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit darker, probably because it didn't have the blending and it didn't have the proofing down. Right. So the first one probably is that same similar proof, but they do proof it down with water to get it to 100. Whereas this one's not been proofed down, so it is a little darker, a little richer. That's probably why the legs are a little bit stronger, because it doesn't have the water added. This one I'm getting more, this is going to sound really strange. I don't think I've ever said this before. I am getting bread notes, but it's almost like a giant baked pretzel.
Okay.
I can't remember the last time I had a big giant baked pretzel, but it kind of reminds me of that. I don't know if the color is influencing me, but it's just because it's not like a Danish, it's not like cake, and it's not like wheat bread or any of that stuff. It's more like that pretzel. Probably the last time I had anything pretzel was maybe a pretzel bun somewhere, and that's kind of what it's reminding me of.
I mean, I personally don't get that, and I love pretzels, but there's definitely, with it being a wheater, there is that sort of baked goods type thing going on.
It's kind of remind me of the pretzels that we get at the Otters games.
Okay. The Evansville Otters is a local independent team out here in Evansville, Indiana.
They have the best pretzels in the world.
They really do.
Ben's pretzels.
Ben's. What do you think of the finish?
I think it's much longer than the first one. On the finish here, I'm getting, it's similar, but it's stronger and longer, and I am getting some caramel notes on the finish of this one. I had a hint of caramel on the first one, but this one definitely feels caramel to me.
Well, for myself, I mentioned at the beginning of it that it starts quickly as a wheater, and it then blends into a cacophony of different flavors. I think it finishes as a wheater, because the wheat all of a sudden for myself returns, and there's a splash of black pepper, and there's also a splash of cinnamon with it that definitely makes it drink hotter. And I think this drinks hotter than, what was it, 121? I would guess this 125 to 130. It's sneaky.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. If I had to pick between the two, I'd probably pick the single barrel, just because I kind of lean towards something a little proofier. But the flavor profiles were good in each one of them, and you can see we've kind of evenly had from these bottles. I turn them sideways. Over time, we've had about the same amount from each bottle, so I think maybe we've hit the single barrel just a little bit more, maybe one extra drink, but we've enjoyed it. And this one's $70.
Okay.
$70, because it is, again, a single barrel, and I think for a 121 proof wheater, I think that's a pretty good price.
I would agree. I go back and forth of which one that I like more, because, and this is a credit to them. They're similar, but they're different. And I think on any given day, I would gravitate toward one, and then on the other day, gravitate toward the other. If you're looking for something that is much more of a wheater on the flavor profile, you probably would go with this. But I think if you're just going for, I want to really get something that's got a lot going on,
and tasty,
and tasty,
good mouthfeel,
yeah,
good finish,
and it's got a little pop, I would definitely go with this one. And this is one of the few times where I'd have to buy both, because I would sit there tasting them as I'm doing now and trying to weigh out which one do I want to get. And I would just buy both. It's not like, which one would you pick? Because it goes back to the idea, different day, different one. These are really, this is a very, it's bringing back a lot of good memories, because it's been so long since we've been there. And when you go on the trail, when you go on the trail, and there's a lot of experiences we've been blessed to have, and people that we've met, and places that we've been. This one here, it brings back a lot of good memories. That was a very, very sneaky little distillery, and definitely worth the time.
Yeah, and we've been talking about doing another trip up to Hard Truth because it's been a bit since we've been up there as well. So, I think it's super easy if you're going to Brown County, Indiana, and going to Nashville, Indiana, because Hard Truth kind of has a bigger name, to add them on your agenda, because it's just literally, if it's not October and cross country state finals, it's like a 15-minute drive between them. So
Yes.
It's super easy to get back and forth between them, and I would highly recommend combining them on a trip.
I agree. We have a friend of ours that's never been to Hard Truth, and he's wanting to go. And I think when we do that, we're gonna have to loop this in, because
So I'm excited that we revisit them today and got a chance to see with the what's what. And I think next week we're gonna be back in Louisville for our Bourbon Trail Tales and Tastes, where we spent the weekend of Halloween one year.
Yep.
And we visited, next will be Copper and Kings. So that'll be fun.
Bear Wallow, cheers to you out there. We definitely will be getting back there. It is a great distillery and a great experience for all of you that are out there that like bourbon. Always remember to drink responsibly. If you like what we do, please follow us. Cheers and have a great day.
Cheers.